I always thought I knew my wife better than anyone else. That's what made the anonymous tip I received one rainy Tuesday morning hit me like a ton of bricks. Your wife is having an affair, it read plain and simple. No name, no proof, just a sentence that started an avalanche in my life. First I laughed it off. Ridiculous, right? We were happy, or so I thought. But as days passed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. It was the little things, her sudden late nights at work, the way she guarded her phone like it held state secrets, and how her laughter, once so familiar, now sounded forced. So, I did what any self-respecting man with a sliver of doubt would do. I decided to follow her. Call it a breach of trust, but that trust was already hanging by a thread. I waited in my car outside her office, heart pounding, hoping I was wrong. But I wasn't. She didn't head straight home as usual. Instead, she drove to this upscale restaurant downtown, the kind we saved for anniversaries. There, under the dim, romantic lights, she met him. Mr. Tall, dark and handsome, laughing at something she said, touching her hand across the table. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, the image of them together burning behind my eyes. Who was this guy? Why was he with my wife? Questions swirled in my mind like a relentless storm. The next day, fueled by a mix of anger and curiosity, I dug into Mr. Mystery's background. It wasn't hard to find him, given the unique watch he wore, a collector's item. Turns out he wasn't Mr. Perfect after all. His past was a checkerboard of shady deals and questionable choices, a real piece of work. But I needed more than just a gut feeling and a sketchy past. I needed proof. So I did something I never imagined I'd do. I bought a tracking device, the kind you'd see in spy movies, and discreetly placed it under her car. I know it sounds extreme, but by then, nothing was too extreme to uncover the truth. And so it began, the unraveling of a life I thought I knew. A journey down a rabbit hole that would change everything. Little did I know this was just the beginning. There's this thing about the truth, it's relentless. It gnaws at you, refusing to be ignored. That's what happened to me the night I overheard her phone call. I wasn't even trying to eavesdrop. I was just passing by her study when I heard his name, and then, "I love you too." Those 4 words, uttered in a whisper, hit me like a freight train. Confrontation was inevitable. I waited, simmering in a mix of rage and disbelief, until she hung up. Then I burst in, demanding answers. Her reaction? Denial. She brushed it off, claiming it was just a work call. But the panic in her eyes told a different story. I couldn't let it go. This wasn't just some misunderstanding, it was my life falling apart. So, I did what any desperate man would do. I hired a private investigator. It felt like a betrayal, hiring someone to spy on my wife, but what choice did I have? I needed to know the truth, no matter how ugly. While the pie did his thing, I started digging into the guy's life myself. The internet is a goldmine if you know where to look. I found out about his business dealings, his friends, even where he liked to hang out. The more I learned, the more I despised him. He wasn't just some random guy, he was a predator, preying on married women. Then came the day the pie called me. His voice was somber as he said, "I've got something you need to see." We met at a dingy diner, the kind where no one cares about your business. He slid an envelope across the table, and my hands trembled as I opened it. Photos. My wife and him, not just talking, but intimate. It was like a punch to the gut. Seeing those images, there was no more room for doubt. She was having an affair, and my world, the one I had built with her, crumbled into dust. I sat there in that diner staring at those pictures, feeling a cocktail of emotions. Anger, sadness, betrayal. I thought I knew her. I thought our love was solid. But in those photos I saw a different story. A story of lies and deceit. This chapter of my life was supposed to be about love and partnership. But all it turned out to be was a tale of betrayal. The truth, no matter how ugly, has a way of demanding to be heard. That's what led me to her family's doorstep. Those damning photos in hand. It was time everyone knew the real face of the woman I called my wife. Their reactions? A mix of shock, disbelief, and anger. Her parents, who'd always treated me like a son, looked like I'd physically struck them. I watched as her mother's eyes filled with tears and her father's face turned to stone. They confronted her, demanding an explanation. But she, with a defiance that shocked me, denied everything, even as the evidence lay bare before them. But that wasn't the end of it. As I dug deeper into her lover's life, I uncovered more than just a trail of broken hearts. This guy was neck deep in illegal activities, the kind that could land him in serious trouble. A plan began to form in my mind, a way to make him pay for the havoc he'd wrought in my life. So, under the veil of anonymity, I tipped off the police. I gave them everything: names, dates, places. It felt good, playing the invisible hand of justice. And when they arrested him, the news exploded like a bombshell. Headlines screamed about the scandal, dragging his name and hers through the mud. The arrest sent ripples through our small town. People gossiped, speculated, and took sides. But as the dust settled, one thing became clear. This wasn't just a simple affair. It was a story of deception, crime, and a fall from grace. Sitting there, watching the story unfold on the evening news, a bitter satisfaction settled over me. The man who'd stolen my wife's heart was now behind bars, and she, once the queen of her social circle, was now its pariah. The irony wasn't lost on me. The secrets they thought were hidden in the shadows were now laid bare for all to see. This chapter of my life, which had started with love and trust, had morphed into something out of a crime novel. I'd set out to uncover the truth, but in doing so, I'd unleashed a storm that swept away the life I once knew. Divorce papers. Never thought I'd be the one signing them. But there I was, pen in hand, ready to end the chapter of my life that had turned into a nightmare. Infidelity was the charge, and the evidence was overwhelming. It was a move I never wanted to make, but sometimes life forces your hand. The moment she received the papers, her demeanor changed. The woman who was once so defiant now came to me, tears in her eyes, begging for another chance. But the well of forgiveness had dried up. Too much had happened, too many lies. I turned her away, my heart heavy but my resolve firm. As the divorce proceedings unfolded, more of her betrayals came to light. It was like peeling back layers of deceit, each one more shocking than the last. I sat there in the courtroom, listening to the litany of her indiscretions, feeling a mixture of sadness and vindication. The person I had loved was a stranger to me now. When the gavel came down, it was in my favor. The settlement granted me most of our assets. It wasn't about the money, though. It was about starting anew on my terms. The house we had shared, the car we had chosen together, they were now mine alone. It was a bittersweet victory. Her fall from grace was swift and total. The friends who had once flocked around her now turned their backs. Invitations dried up. Whispers followed her in the streets. She had played a dangerous game and lost everything: her marriage, her reputation, her social standing. Meanwhile, my business started to thrive like never before. The community rallied around me, offering support in ways I never expected. Old clients returned, new ones came knocking. It was as if the whole town wanted to lift me from the ruins of my personal life. As I sat in my office looking at the thriving business I had built, a sense of accomplishment filled me. The road had been rough, the journey painful, but here I was standing strong. I had lost a wife, but gained a community, lost a partner, but rediscovered myself. This chapter of my life, marked by betrayal and heartache, was closing. But as one chapter ends, another begins. And this new chapter was mine to write, on a clean slate with hope as my compass. Life's funny. Just when you think you've hit rock bottom, it hands you a shovel to dig a bit deeper. That's what happened to her. The scandal that rocked our lives didn't just leave emotional scars. It left her grappling with the real-world consequences of her actions. Jobs? She was now toxic. Employers shied away as if she had the plague. It was a harsh reality check for a woman who once had it all. Meanwhile, there I was standing amidst the wreckage of our shared past, ready to rebuild. I embraced self-improvement like a man parched in a desert embraces water. Fitness, books, seminars, you name it, I was into it. I was sculpting a new me, someone stronger, wiser, and more grounded. Then one day she showed up at my doorstep, a shadow of the confident woman she once was. Her eyes, once so full of life, now held a desperate plea. She wanted to reconcile, to go back to the way things were. But you can't unscramble eggs. I closed the door on her in that chapter of my life, not out of spite, but because some things can't be fixed. Her plight worsened. With no job and dwindling savings, she was a sinking ship. I heard through the grapevine about her struggles, about missed rent and unpaid bills. Part of me felt sorry for her, but it was a bed of her own making. As for me, life was an adventure waiting to be embraced. I discovered hobbies I never knew I'd enjoy. Photography, hiking, even salsa dancing. Each new activity was a thread in the vibrant tapestry of my new life. I was no longer the man who had been cheated on. I was the man who rose from the ashes of betrayal. This journey from the depths of despair to the heights of self-discovery was not one I had planned. But as I stood there, camera in hand, capturing the sunset, I realized something profound. Life doesn't always give you what you want, but sometimes it gives you what you need. And what I needed was this: a fresh start, a new perspective, and the realization that no matter how hard it hits you, you can always hit back harder. Just when I thought I'd left the past behind, it came knocking at my door, uninvited and unwelcome. It started with him, her lover, the cause of all the turmoil. Fresh out of jail with nowhere to turn, he sought her out. Imagine that. The very man who helped shatter our lives, now back for more. I heard about their confrontation through the grapevine. He was angry, accusing her of abandoning him, of not being there when the going got tough. The irony of his accusations wasn't lost on me. There they were, two people who once conspired in secrecy, now at each other's throats. I could have intervened, played the hero. But why? This was their mess, their battle. I had my own life to live, far removed from the drama that once consumed me. So I stayed out of it, a spectator from a distance. But it didn't end there. He started harassing her for money, relentless in his pursuit. She who once lived a life of comfort, now found herself dodging threats and pleas for cash. Her fall from grace had turned into a free fall. Then, in a twist I never saw coming, her friends came to me. They asked me to step in to help her out of the mess she was in. They said it was my duty, that the history we shared obligated me to act. But they didn't understand. That history was exactly why I couldn't help. I was sympathetic, sure, no one deserves to be harassed, to live in fear. But this was a chapter one had closed, a part of my life I had moved on from. I couldn't be her savior, not after everything that had happened. So I declined as gently as I could. I told them that her path was no longer mine to tread. It was a decision that wasn't easy, but it was necessary. For me to truly move forward, I had to let go completely, even if it meant turning a deaf ear to her plight. This chapter of my life, once filled with love and then betrayal, was now a distant memory. A story with chapters one no longer wished to read. I had new stories to write, new chapters to fill with adventures of my own making. And as I closed the door on her friends, I knew I had made the right choice. Sometimes the hardest decisions are the ones that lead us to true freedom. Life's a journey of crossroads, and at each one we make a choice. My choice was clear. Move forward, leave the past behind. So when her friends pleaded with me to help her, I stood my ground. She had to face the consequences of her actions, just as I had to face the aftermath of her betrayal. It was a chapter closed, a lesson learned. Meanwhile, she got tangled in a legal battle with him, her former lover. It was like watching two scorpions in a bottle, each trying to sting the other harder. Their affair had spiraled into a pit of lawsuits and accusations, a far cry from their secret rendezvous. As for me, I embraced the freedom that my new life offered. I traveled, something I had always wanted to do but never found the time for. From the bustling streets of Tokyo to the serene beaches of Bali, each destination was a balm to my soul. I met new people, experienced different cultures, and for the first time in a long time I felt alive. Back home, the news eventually reached me. She lost her legal battle. Not only was her reputation in tatters, but she was also now drowning in legal debts. It was a harsh outcome, but one that was perhaps inevitable. Her choices had led her to this point, and there was no one else to blame. As I stood on a cliff overlooking the azure waters of the Mediterranean, I realized how far I'd come. The pain that had once consumed me was now just a distant echo, a reminder of a past life. I had found peace not by holding on to grudges, but by letting go and moving on. This chapter of my life, once darkened by betrayal, was now illuminated by new experiences and the promise of a fresh start. And as I looked out at the horizon, I knew that the best was yet to come. In the game of life, the rumor mill is the wild card, dealing hands unexpected and often undeserved. As for her, the whispers began to swirl, painting her not just as a cheat, but as an accomplice in his illegal activities. True or not, the rumors clung to her like shadows, darkening her already tarnished image. It was a wildfire that consumed whatever little sympathy the town had left for her. While her world continued to crumble, I found solace in reconnecting with old friends. There's something about shared history that brings comfort, like a familiar blanket on a cold night. We reminisced, laughed, and I remembered the man I was before all the chaos. Those bonds, once stretched thin by neglect, grew strong again, anchoring me in a community that had always been my home. But the real twist came when she was shunned by her own family. The very people who had stood by her, hoping for a sliver of innocence, finally turned their backs. It was a sad sight watching her lose the last of her support system, but it was a bed of her own making. Amidst this backdrop of fallen grace, I found myself stepping back into the dating world. It was tentative at first, like testing the waters after a storm. Then I met her, someone who shared my values, my love for life, and my appetite for adventure. She was a breath of fresh air, a beacon of hope in a journey I once thought was destined for solitude. But just as I was turning a new page, my ex-wife, driven by jealousy, attempted to discredit my new relationship. It was a desperate move, one that reeked of bitterness. She spread lies, trying to sow doubts among our friends. But her words fell on deaf ears. The community knew me, knew my story, and they rallied around me stronger than ever. As I stood by my new partner hand in hand, facing the petty attempts to pull us apart, I realized how far I'd come. I was no longer the broken man, nursing his wounds in solitude. I was part of something bigger, a relationship built on trust and respect, and a community that stood by me through thick and thin. This chapter of my life, once marred by betrayal, was now a tale of redemption and new beginnings. It was a testament to the power of resilience, and the strength that comes from knowing you're not alone. Life has a way of coming full circle, often in the most unexpected ways. As my ex-wife's desperate attempts to smear my new relationship fell flat, I felt a profound sense of vindication. The community, which had once seen us as the perfect couple, now saw the truth. They rallied around me, their support a solid wall against her crumbling facade of lies. Meanwhile, her spiral into despair deepened. Financial instability, a direct consequence of her actions, led her to the brink of eviction. It was a stark contrast to the life she once led, a life she had gambled away. I heard about her struggles, the whispers of sympathy and schadenfreude intertwined, but I remained detached. Her path was no longer mine to ponder. In the midst of this, a new chapter in my life began. With the ocean as witness and the sunset painting the sky, I proposed to my partner. Her yes was a beacon of hope, a promise of a future filled with love and honesty. It was a moment of unadulterated joy, a stark contrast to the pain of the past. But my ex-wife, ever the actress, attempted one final act of redemption, a public apology made with tearful eyes and quivering lips. Yet it backfired spectacularly. People saw through the performance, recognizing it for the desperate ploy it was. It only served to further alienate her, her words dissolving into the sea of her past deceits. As for us, the news of our engagement spread through the town like a warm breeze. Congratulations poured in, each one a testament to the community's support and affection. It was heartwarming to see how much goodwill surrounded us, a stark contrast to the isolation and condemnation that now enveloped my ex-wife. This chapter of my life, once overshadowed by betrayal and heartache, was now glowing with the promise of a new beginning. It was a testament to the belief that even after the darkest nights, the sun will rise. And as I stood there, hand in hand with my fiancé, I knew that this sunrise was just the beginning of a beautiful journey ahead. They say every story has its end, but sometimes the end is just a new beginning. As I embarked on this new chapter of my life, news about my ex-wife reached me, painting a picture of a life unraveling at the seams. Her isolation had taken a toll on her mental health, a sad consequence of the bridges she had burned. It was a sobering reminder of how the choices we make can lead us down paths we never intended to tread. But amidst the echoes of her downfall, my own life blossomed into something beautiful. Our wedding was a celebration of love and new beginnings, a joyous ceremony surrounded by friends, family, and a community that had stood by me through the storm. The laughter, the tears of joy, and the love that filled the air were a balm to the wounds of past. However, even in moments of joy, shadows from the past can linger. In an act of desperation, my ex-wife attempted to crash our wedding. It was a scene straight out of a dramatic movie, but this was real life, and the pain in her eyes was palpable. Yet she was gently turned away, A final closing of the chapter we once shared. The honeymoon that followed was a dream. We traveled to places we'd only seen in pictures, creating memories that would last a lifetime. Each day was a celebration, not just of our love, but of the resilience of the human spirit. We explored, laughed, and loved, fully embracing the happiness we had found in each other. As I sat there watching the sunset on a perfect honeymoon evening, I couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought me here. The pain, the betrayal, the heartache, they had all led to this moment of utter contentment. I realized that adversity hadn't just tested me, it had taught me. It taught me about strength, about forgiveness, and about the power of moving forward. My ex-wife, once a central figure in my life, had become a cautionary tale. A tale of how cheating and betrayal can lead to a life of loneliness and regret. It was a harsh truth, but a truth nonetheless. This story, my story, was one of triumph over adversity, of finding love after loss, and of the unyielding support of those who stood by me. As I looked forward to the chapters yet to be written, I knew that the lessons I had learned would guide me through whatever life had in store. And in that moment, I realized that the truest form of success wasn't just overcoming adversity, but using it as a stepping stone to build a life even better than before.